Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 22 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6. And today we're starting chapter 12, which is titled Vritrasura's Glorious Death. First of all, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shivati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Jatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yes, right. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 12, Vritrasura's Glorious Death. So there are 35 verses here in this chapter, which we've divided into 6 sections as follows. Number 1, from verse 1 to verse 5, Vritrasura and Indra fight. Number 2, verse 6 to verse 17, Vritrasura preaches to Lord Indra. Section 3, verse 18 to verse 22, Indra speaks to Vritrasura. Section 4, verse 23 to verse 31, the battle continues further. Section 5, verse 32 to verse 34, the death of Vritrasura. And 6th section, just verse 35 on its own, Vritrasura goes back to Godhead. Sure, yeah, pretty amazing chapter this. Okay, let us begin. Section 1, verse 1 to verse 5, Vritrasura and Indra fight. And let's just have a look well, There's 5 verses, only one has a short purport, so we'll just go straight through them. Verse 1. Shukadev Goswami said, desiring to give up his body, Vritrasura considered death in the battle preferable to victory. O King Parikshit, he vigorously took up his trident and with great force attacked Lord Indra, the king of heaven, just as Kaitaba had forcefully attacked the Supreme Personality of Godhead when the universe was inundated. So there is a short purport here. Prabhupada says that although Vritrasura, as we read yesterday, repeatedly urged Indra, come on, kill me. Indra was not happy at the prospect of killing someone who was obviously great devotee. And Vritrasura was disappointed. So he took the chance, the more violently he attacked, he assumed, the more vigorously Indra would be forced to fight back and kill him sooner. Yeah. Vritrasura didn't want to, and he wanted to die so he could go back to Godhead. We already discussed that quite a bit. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 9, a verse which we've looked at on numerous occasions, just in this particular Canto 6. So Chakvidayam Punarjanma Naiti, after giving up his body, a devotee immediately returns to Lord Krishna and never returns to accept another body. This was Vritrasura's interest. Verse 2. Then Vritrasura, the great hero of the demons, whirled his trident, which had points like the flames of the blazing fire at the end of the millennium. With great force and anger he threw it at Indra, roaring and exclaiming loudly, "O sinful one, thus shall I kill you." Verse 3. Flying in the sky, Vritrasura's trident resembled a brilliant meteor. Although the blazing weapon was difficult to look upon, King Indra, unafraid, cut it to pieces with his thunderbolt. Simultaneously, he cut off one of Vritrasura's arms, which was as thick as the body of Vasuki, the king of the serpents. Verse 4. Although one of his arms was severed from his body, Vritrasura angrily approached King Indra and struck him on the jaw with an iron mace. He also struck the elephant that carried Indra. Thus Indra dropped the thunderbolt from his hand. Verse 5. The denizens of various planets, like the demigods, demons, charanas, and siddhas, praised Vritrasura's deed. But when they observed that Indra was in great danger, they lamented, "Alas, alas." Section 2, verse 6 to verse 17. Vritrasura preaches to Lord Indra. And let's just have a look at this. I assume we're going to have to go through. We'll read the verses through first of all, and then we'll come back, do them again with their purports. Verse 6. Having dropped the thunderbolt from his hand in the presence of his enemy, Indra was practically defeated and was very much ashamed. He dared not pick up his weapon again. Vritrasura, however, encouraged him, saying, "Take up your thunderbolt and kill your enemy. This is not the time to lament your fate." Verse 7. Vritrasura continued, "O Indra, no one is guaranteed of being always victorious, but the original enjoyer, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagava. He is the cause of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and he knows everything. Being dependent and being obliged to accept material bodies, belligerent subordinates are sometimes victorious and sometimes defeated." Verse 8. All living beings in all the planets of the universe, including the presiding deities of all the planets, are fully under the control of the Lord. They work like birds caught in a net, who cannot move independently. Verse 9. Our sensory prowess, mental power, bodily strength, living force, immortality, and mortality are all subject to the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not knowing this, foolish people think the dull material body to be the cause of their activities. Verse 10. O King Indra, as a wooden doll that looks like a woman, or as an animal made of grass and leaves, cannot move or dance independently, but depends fully on the person who handles it. All of us dance according to the desire of the Supreme Controller, the Personality of Godhead. No one is independent. Verse 11. The three Purushas, Karanadakshay Vishnu, Garbhadakshay Vishnu, and Shiradakshay Vishnu, the material nature, the total material energy, the false ego, the five material elements, the material senses, the mind, the intelligence, and consciousness cannot create the material manifestation without the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 12. A foolish, senseless person cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although always dependent, he falsely thinks himself the Supreme. If one thinks, according to one's previous fruit of actions, one's material body is created by the father and mother, and the same body is annihilated by another agent, as another animal is devoured by a tiger. So if one thinks like this, this is not proper understanding. The Supreme Personality of Godhead himself creates and devours the living beings through other living beings. Verse 13. Just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, opulence, fame, and everything else at the time of death, so at the appointed time of victory, one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by his mercy. 14. Since everything is dependent on the supreme will of the personality of Godhead, one should be equipoised in fame and defamation, victory and defeat, life and death. In their effects, represented as happiness and distress, one should maintain oneself in equilibrium without anxiety. Verse 15. One who knows that the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not qualities of the soul, but qualities of material nature, and who knows that the pure soul is simply an observer of the actions and reactions of these qualities. So one who knows these things should be understood to be a liberated person. He is not bound by these qualities. Verse 16. O my enemy, just look at me. I've already been defeated, for my weapon and arm have been cut to pieces. You've already overwhelmed me, but nonetheless, with the desire to kill you, I'm trying my best to fight. I'm not at all morose, even under such adverse conditions. Therefore, you should give up your moroseness and continue fighting. Verse 17, O my enemy, consider this battle a gambling match in which our lives are the stakes, the arrows are the dice, and the animals acting as carriers are the game board. No one can understand who will be defeated and who will be victorious. It all depends on providence. Right, yes, so this is Vritrasura preaching to Lord Indra. Verse 6 to verse 17. So let's go back through the verses with their purports where there are. Verse 6, having dropped the thunderbolt from his hand in the presence of his enemy, Indra was practically defeated and was very much ashamed. He dared not pick up his weapon again. Vritrasura, however, encouraged him, saying, take up your thunderbolt and kill your enemy. This is not the time to lament your fate. Verse 7, Vritrasura continued, O Indra, no one is guaranteed of being always victorious except the original enjoyer, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. He is the cause of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and he knows everything. Being dependent and being obliged to accept material bodies, belligerent subordinates are sometimes victorious and sometimes defeated. Yes, so there is a fairly substantial purport here. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, famous verse, how many times have we encountered it in Bhakti Vaibhava, so many times. But anyway, Lord says, Sarvasya chaham riddhi sanivishto, matasmriti jnanam apornam cha. I'm situated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So Prabhupada makes the point that when people fight, it's going on under the super soul's direction. And elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 27, the Lord says, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudatma karta aham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. So the living entities are simply working under the Lord's direction, and he is ordering the material nature, and she is responding to the orders and giving facilities. So the living entities are not independent, although they think they are the doers. Second paragraph. So the thing is, the bottom line here is, victory is always with the Lord. The living entities, they fight under his arrangement, and their victory or defeat is arranged by him through material nature. So therefore, pride in victory or moroseness in defeat is useless. Rather, one should depend on the Lord. And, that means that if you're defeated, which inevitably happens sometimes, one should take it that, this is the arrangement of the Lord, not be morose. Rather pray to him, please help me to understand what I should learn from this defeat. So Krishna advises, perform your prescribed duty, for action is better than inaction. We should act according to our position, and whether there's victory or defeat, that's up to the Lord. Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita famous verse, Karmanyevadikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. You have the right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Third paragraph. So therefore, Vritrasura is encouraging Indra, don't be morose because of my victory. There's no need to stop fighting. No, you have to carry on with your duty. Then, if Krishna desires, you'll be victorious. And Prabhupada says this verse is very instructive for sincere devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement. Yeah, very instructive indeed. Don't be morose if your opponent is victorious. No need to stop fighting. Rather, you must just go on with your duty, and if Krishna desires, you'll become victorious. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, we should not be jubilant in victory or morose in defeat. We should make a sincere effort to implement the will of Krishna or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we should not be concerned with victory and defeat. Our only duty is to work sincerely, so that our activities may be recognized by Krishna. Verse 8, all living beings in all the planets of the universe, including the presiding deities of all the planets, are fully under the control of the Lord. They work like birds caught in a net who cannot move independently. So there's a short purport here. The difference, Prabhupada, having discussed at other times and other ways, the difference between the suras and asuras, the demigods and the demons, is that the suras, or the demigods, or the devotees, they know that nothing happens without the desire of the Lord, whereas the demons cannot understand the will of the Lord. So in this fight, Prabhupada says, Vritrasura is the sura, the demigod or the devotee, and Indra is the asura, the demon. And no one can act independently. Everyone's acting under the Lord's direction. And so, here at least Prabhupada explains, victory and defeat come by karma, and the final judgment is given by the Lord. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, since we act under the control of the Supreme according to our karma, no one is independent from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. Whether we're defeated or victorious, the Supreme Lord is always victorious, because everyone acts under his directions. Verse 9, our sensory prowess, mental power, bodily strength, living force, immortality, and mortality are all subject to the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not knowing this, foolish people think the dull material body to be the cause of their activities. Verse 10, O King Indra, as a wooden doll that looks like a woman, or as an animal made of grass and leaves, cannot move or dance independently, but depends fully on the person who handles it. All of us dance according to the desire of the Supreme Controller, the Personality of Godhead. No one is independent. Prabhupada refers to Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, chapter 5, verse 142, which confirms Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ara Sababritya Yare Yaiche Nachaya Setai Che Karinritya. Lord Krishna alone is the Supreme Controller, and all others are his servants. They dance as he makes them do so. Yes, so that particularly the first line there, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ara Sababritya, that's quite a famous statement of Lord Chaitanya's. Lord Krishna is the only controller, Ekale Ishvara, the only controller. Ara Sababritya, everyone else is his servant. So we dance according to his desire, but people in ignorance think we're independent. And therefore it is explained, Brahma Samhita verse 1, Ishvara Parama Krishna. Krishna, who's known as Govinda, is the Supreme Controller. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. Verse 11, the three Purushas, Karana Dakshai Vishnu, Garbha Dakshai Vishnu, and Shira Dakshai Vishnu. The material nature, the total material energy, the false ego, the five material elements, the material senses, the mind, the intelligence and consciousness cannot create the material manifestation without the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yes, so let's have a look at Prabhupada's purport. He refers first to the Vishnu Purana, and there's famous verse there, Parasya Brahmana Shaktis, Tate Dharmakilam Jagat. Well, it's not actually that famous. Yeah. Anyway, whatever manifestations we experience are nothing but various energies of the Lord. And these energies can't act independently. And this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 10, Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it's producing all moving and unmoving beings. So it's only under the Lord's direction that material nature can create situations for us, for the living beings. And it's not stated where, but just in the Vedas, there's a statement by the Lord, Madhyam Mahimanam Cha Parabrahmeti Shabditam Vetsyasya Nugritam Me Samprashnaya Vivritam Hridi Since everything is a manifestation of my energy, I am known as Parabrahman. Therefore, everyone should hear from me about my glorious activities. Then the Lord also says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 2, Aham Adir Hi Devanam, I am the origin of all the demigods. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Srila Madhvacharya also says, Anisha Jiva Rupena, the living entity is Anisha, never the controller, but is always controlled. Therefore, when a living entity becomes proud of being an independent Ishvara or God, that is his foolishness. Such foolishness is described in the following verse, verse 12. A foolish, senseless person cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although always dependent, he falsely thinks himself the Supreme. If one thinks, according to one's previous fruit of actions, one's material body is created by the father and mother, and the same body is annihilated by another agent, as another animal is devoured by a tiger. So if one thinks like that, this is not proper understanding. The Supreme Personality of Godhead himself creates and devours the living entities through other living beings. So Srila Prabhupada points out that according to Karma Mimamsa, our karma is the cause of everything, so there's no need to work. But this is stupid. And Prabhupada gives the example, when a father creates a child, he doesn't do it independently, rather he's induced by the Lord. And again, Bhagavad Gita 15:15, I am in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So unless we get dictation from the Lord in the heart, we can't be induced to create anything. So therefore the parents are not the creators of the living being. According to the living being's karma, the living being is put into the semen of the father and injected into the womb of the mother. Then according to the bodies of the parents, the living entity gets their body to suffer and enjoy. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore the Supreme Lord is the original cause of one's birth. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the cause of one's being killed. No one is independent, everyone is dependent. The true conclusion is that the only independent person is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, opulence, fame, and everything else at the time of death, so at the appointed time of victory, one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by his mercy. So Prabhupada explains that it's not good to be falsely proud and think that by your own efforts you've become opulent and learned, etc., etc. It's all coming by the Lord's mercy. Yeah. But then, no one wants to die, no one wants to be poor, no one wants to be ugly. So how does the living entity get these troubles? It's one thing getting opulences, but what about all these troubles? Yeah, against one's will. So, it's due to the mercy or chastisement of the Lord that one gains or loses everything material. Prabhupada mentions there's a saying in Bengali that the Lord has 10 hands, means he controls everywhere in the 8 directions and up and down. So if he wants to take from us with his 10 hands, we can't stop him without 2. So similarly, if he wants to benedict us with his 10 hands, we can't receive it all without 2. So the conclusion is, even though we don't want to lose things, sometimes the Lord forcibly takes them. then sometimes he showers us so much we can't receive it all. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore, either in opulence or in distress, we are not independent. Everything is dependent on the sweet will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 14. Since everything is dependent on the supreme will of the Personality of Godhead, one should be equipoised in fame and defamation, victory and defeat, life and death. In their effects, represented as happiness and distress, one should maintain oneself in equilibrium without anxiety. Verse 15. One who knows that the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not qualities of the soul, but qualities of material nature, and who knows that the pure soul is simply an observer of the actions and reactions of these qualities, so such a person should be understood to be a liberated person. He is not bound by these qualities. So, in the purport, Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, verse 54. I'll just read the translation. One who's transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He's equally disposed to every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. So when you come to the Brahma Bhuta stage, then you know that whatever's happening in life is due to the modes. But the pure soul has nothing to do with the modes. In the middle of the hurricane of the material world, everything changes quickly. But if we remain silent and just observe the actions and reactions of the hurricane, then we're liberated. So the real qualification of the liberated soul is that they remain Krishna conscious, not affected by the actions and reactions of the material nature. And in this way they're always jubilant. And they never lament or aspire to have anything or resent having anything. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, since everything is supplied by the Supreme Lord, the living entity being fully dependent on him should not protest or accept anything in terms of his personal sense gratification. Rather, he should receive everything as the mercy of the Lord and remain steady in all circumstances. Verse 16. O my enemy, just look at me. I've already been defeated, for my weapon and arm have been cut to pieces. You've already overwhelmed me, but nonetheless, with a desire to kill you, I'm trying my best to fight. I'm not at all morose, even under such adverse conditions. Therefore, you should give up your moroseness and continue fighting. This is Vritrasura. A short purport. Vritrasura was so great and powerful that in effect, he was acting as the spiritual master of Indra. Although Vritrasura was on the verge of defeat, he was not at all affected. He knew that he was going to be defeated by Indra, and he voluntarily accepted that. But since he was supposed to be Indra's enemy, he tried his best to kill Indra. Thus he performed his duty. One should perform his duty under all circumstances, even though one may know what the result will be. That's interesting. So verse 17. O my enemy, consider this battle a gambling match, in which our lives are the stakes, the arrows are the dice, and the animals acting as carriers are the game board. No one can understand who will be defeated and who will be victorious. It all depends on providence. Right, so the next section, the next section is from verse 18 to verse 22. And that was Vritrasura speaking, just for the last 5 or 10 minutes or so. Now Indra speaks to Vritrasura from verse 18 to verse 22. We'll read the verses first of all. Shukadev Goswami said, hearing the straightforward, instructive words of Vritrasura, King Indra praised him and again took the thunderbolt in his hand. Without bewilderment or duplicity, he then smiled and spoke to Vritrasura as follows. Indra said, O great demon, I see by your discrimination and endurance in devotional service, despite your dangerous position, that you are, you are a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul and friend of everyone. Verse 20. You have surmounted the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, and because of this liberation, you have given up the demoniac mentality and have attained the position of an exalted devotee. 21. O Vritrasura, demons are generally conducted by the mode of passion. Therefore, what a great wonder it is that although you're a demon, you have adopted the mentality of a devotee and have fixed your mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, who is always situated in pure goodness. 22. A person fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord Hari, the Lord of the highest auspiciousness, swims in the ocean of nectar. For him, what is the use of the water in small ditches? All right, so devotees, back we go. Indra speaks to Vritrasura, 18 to 22, verse 18. Shukadev Goswami said, hearing the straightforward, instructive words of Vritrasura, King Indra praised him and again took the thunderbolt in his hand. Without bewilderment or duplicity, he then smiled and spoke to Vritrasura as follows. Short purport. King Indra, the greatest of the demigods, was astonished to hear the instructions of Vritrasura, who was supposed to be a demon. He was struck with wonder that a demon could speak so intelligently. Then he remembered great devotees like Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, who had been born in the families of demons, and thus he came to his senses. Even so-called demons sometimes have exalted devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore Indra smiled reassuringly at Vritrasura. Verse 19, Indra said, O great demon, I see by your discrimination and endurance in devotional service, despite your dangerous position, that you are a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul and friend of everyone. So, yes, there's a purport here. Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, verse 22. I'll just read the translation. Established in Krishna consciousness, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there's no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. Yeah. So that's unalloyed devotees, never disturbed by even the greatest difficulty. And so Indra's surprised that Vritrasura is so fixed in devotional service. It's impossible for a demon to think like this. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, however, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, anyone can become an exalted devotee. Striya Vaishastata Shudras Tepi Yanti Param Gatim. An unalloyed devotee is sure to return home back to Godhead. 20. You have surmounted the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, and because of this liberation you have given up the demoniac mentality and have attained the position of an exalted devotee. So Lord Vishnu is the Mahapurusha, greatest person. So one who becomes a Vaishnava attains the position of a Mahapurusha. Parikshit Maharaj achieved that position. And Padma Purana talks about the difference between the demigods and the demons. Demigods are devotees, whereas demons are the opposite. And all the devotees of Lord Vishnu are devas or demigods, whereas all others are asuras. So Vritrasura was considered a demon, but actually he was a devotee, a Mahapurusha, Mahupurusha. If someone becomes a devotee, whatever his position materially, he can become perfect. And it can happen if an unalloyed devotee delivers him. Then Prabhupada refers to Bhagavatam 2.4.18, famous verse, Kiratas, Hunas, Andras, Pulandas, Pulkashas, Abiras, Shumbas, Yavanas, and members of the Kasha races, and even others addicted to sinful acts, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, for he is the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So anyone can become purified if they take shelter of a pure devotee. And then they mold their character according to his direction. Then they can become Mahapurushas. Verse 21. O Vritrasura, demons are generally conducted by the mode of passion. Therefore, what a great wonder it is that although you're a demon, you have adopted the mentality of a devotee and have fixed your mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, who's always situated in pure goodness. This short paragraph, Indra's wondering, how did Vritrasura become an exalted devotee? But then he remembers that Prahlad, he did, even though he was born in a family of devotees. But Vritrasura, Indra couldn't understand what could have caused this, him becoming a great devotee. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore he was struck with wonder that Vritrasura was such an exalted devotee that he could fix his mind without deviation upon the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, Vasudeva. Verse 22. A person fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord Hari, the Lord of the highest auspiciousness, swims in the ocean of nectar. For him, what is the use of the water in small ditches? So yes, Prabhupada points out how Vritrasura had prayed in the previous chapter. You remember the last 4 verses, the prayers of Vritrasura. So in verse 25 there, he prayed, I do not want the facilities for happiness on Brahmaloka, Swargaloka, or even Dhruvaloka, not to speak of this earth or the lower planets. I simply want to return home back to Godhead. That is the determination of the pure devotee. No attraction to a position in this world. Just wants to associate with the Lord and the devotees of Vrindavan and associate with the atmosphere of Vrindavan. These are the devotees' highest ambitions. So, of course, devotees of Lord Vishnu may aspire for a position in Vaikuntha, but devotees of Krishna never aspire for that. They want to go to Gokula Vrindavan and associate with Krishna. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, any material happiness is like water in a ditch. whereas the spiritual happiness eternally enjoyed in the spiritual world is like an ocean of nectar in which a devotee wants to swim. So now, the fourth section, verse 23 to verse 31, the battle continues further. And let's just have a very quick look here. You know, there's just one purport. There's just one short purport here. I'm going to read straight through. Verse 23, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Vritrasura and King Indra spoke about devotional service even on the battlefield, and then as a matter of duty, they again began fighting. My dear king, both of them were great fighters and were equally powerful. Verse 24, O Maharaj Parikshit, Vritrasura, who was completely able to subdue his enemy, took his iron club, whirled it around, aimed it at Indra, and threw it at him with his left hand. 25. With his thunderbolt named Shataparvan, Indra simultaneously cut to pieces Vritrasura's club and his remaining hand. Hare Krishna. 26. Vritrasura bleeding profusely, his two arms cut off at their roots, looked very beautiful, like a flying mountain whose wings have been cut to pieces by Indra. And Srila Prabhupada gives a one-sentence purport to that verse. It appears from the statement of this verse that sometimes there are flying mountains and that their wings are cut by the thunderbolt of Indra. Vritrasura's huge body resembled such a mountain. Verses 27 to 29. Vritrasura was very powerful in physical strength and influence. He placed his lower jaw on the ground and his upper jaw in the sky. His mouth became very deep, like the sky itself, and his tongue resembled a large serpent. With his fearful, death-like teeth, he seemed to be trying to devour the entire universe. Thus, assuming a gigantic body, the great demon Vritrasura shook even the mountains and began crushing the surface of the earth with his legs, as if he were the Himalayas walking about. He came before Indra and swallowed him and Airavata, his carrier, just as a big python might swallow an elephant. Verse 30. When the demigods, along with Brahma, other Prajapatis and other great saintly persons, saw that Indra had been swallowed by the demon, they became very morose. Alas, they lamented, what a calamity! What a calamity! Verse 31. The protective armor of Narayan, which Indra possessed, was identical with Narayan himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Protected by that armor and by his own mystic power, King Indra, although swallowed by Vritrasura, did not die within the demon's belly. So, don't forget, this armor was made by Vishvarup as a service to Indra, although Indra shortly afterwards killed him. Right, okay, so, so we go on to the next section, section 5, verse 32 to verse 34, the death of Vritrasura. There are no purports here for these 3 verses, so I just read straight through, of course. With his thunderbolt, King Indra who was also extremely powerful, pierced through Vritrasura's abdomen and came out. Indra, the killer of the demon Bala, then immediately cut off Vritrasura's head, which was as high as the peak of a mountain. 33. Although the thunderbolt revolved around Vritrasura's neck with great speed, separating his head from his body took 1 complete year, 360 days, the time in which the sun, moon, and other luminaries complete a northern and southern journey. Then at the suitable time for Vritrasura to be killed, his head fell to the ground. Verse 34. When Vritrasura was killed, the Gandharvas and Siddhas in the heavenly planets beat kettle drums in jubilation. With Vedic hymns, they celebrated the prowess of Indra, the killer of Vritrasura, praising Indra and showering flowers upon him with great pleasure. So, yes, finally, the 6th section, which is just verse 35, Vritrasura goes back to Godhead. Verse 35. O King Parikshit, subduer of enemies, the living spark then came forth from Vritrasura's body and returned home back to Godhead. While all the demigods looked on, he entered the transcendental world to become an associate of Lord Sankarshan. Wow, amazing. Yes, so there's a purport here by Srila Prabhupada. It's a very important purport. Listen to this. You've got to listen to this carefully. It's really quite something. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Indra, not Vritrasura, was actually killed. He says, when Vritrasura swallowed Indra and the elephant, he thought, now I've killed Indra, so no need to continue fighting. Let me go home back to Godhead. So Vritrasura stopped all bodily activities and went into trance, into samadhi. Taking advantage of the silence of Vritrasura's body, Indra came out. Because of Vritrasura's trance, he was able to come out. So now Vritrasura was in yoga samadhi. But although Indra wanted to cut his throat, Vritrasura's neck was so stiff that it took the Vajra, the thunderbolt, a year. So it was just the body left by Vritrasura that was cut by Indra. Vritrasura was not killed. He had already gone back to Godhead. So in his original consciousness, Vritrasura went home back to Godhead to become an associate of Lord Sankarshan. So Prabhupada says that here the word alokam means the transcendental world, Vaikuntha-loka, where Sankarshan eternally resides. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.